praying for you, because it's so important to us that we stay connected to you, even as you are worshiping with us at home. But we are always so grateful that we get to be scattered across our community and worshiping together as one community all over the place. So thank you so much for joining us. We are going to kick off worship here in just a second. We're so glad that you're here.
Good morning. Happy New Year. Would you all stand with me?
Come, let us worship the King.
you pray with me? Lord, as we go into this new year, that's our prayer, that we would make room for you, that we would make room in our hearts for you to speak to us whatever you want to, Lord. We would make room in our lives, that we would be obedient, we'd follow where you lead us. God, we want to be used by you, so we ask that you would do whatever you want to in our lives. Help us make room in our schedules, in our lives, with our relationships. Lord, would you help us make the room so you can move however you want to. We come into this new year with surrender. God, we're so thankful for you. We're so thankful for your faithfulness and your goodness in our lives, and we love you so very much. And we pray this all in your son's name. Amen. You can have a seat. Well, good morning, friends. We're so happy that you're here this morning, so happy to kick off 2021 with you. Happy New Year. That's the best. And we're so happy that you're here with us this morning. For those of you joining online, welcome. We are so happy to have you joining us as well. We just love that we get to worship as one community, even scattered across homes. It's just incredible. So we're so happy that you're joining us as well. So a couple things that I want to share with you that we have coming up. Just like always, we're doing the first Tuesday of the month, our social distancing worship night, okay? So for that, what we do is we spread out, and let me be clear, we really need to change the name of that because we don't social distance, we physical distance, right? We are about pursuing community. That's what we're talking about in this series. And so we won't be social distancing, we will be physically distancing outside so we can worship together and kick off this new year in worship and focusing our attention on Jesus. So I really hope that you'll join us for that. That's Tuesday at 7 o'clock. It's always about an hour. It's a great thing for the whole family. And you can choose to stay in your car or you can choose to spread out around the cones that we have. But I really encourage you to take some time and join us for that. If you do choose to worship outside of your car, just make sure you bring a lawn chair because we won't have chairs provided, but we'll have space for you. And we can't wait to worship with you. So we hope to see you Tuesday at 7. And then also on Saturday, we're kicking off our second Saturday serve of the year. That's exciting. So if you have been around Restoration, you know that we serve consistently. This is something that is part of who we are as a community. It's in our DNA. And so every second Saturday of the month, we set aside time to be serving in our community with our community partners. And one of our community partners is Eckerd Connects. Now, if you're familiar with Eckerd, you know that they support foster families in our community. And we have a great contact there with the Hope Rising Room. And that room is all about making sure kids have what they need as they transition into the foster care system. So as you can imagine, it would probably be pretty tough, right? The moment that you are taken from your home, from everything you know, and often these kids aren't able to take very much with them, right? And so maybe they have, often it's a garbage bag or something like that with just a few belongings. And so what the social worker does is they take them to this home to this room before they take them to what will be their new home for this season. They take them to this room and it's full of items that they may need, and they let the children shop in that room. And they get to pick out maybe a backpack, they get to pick out some toiletry items, some new clothes, some things where they can say, these are mine, this is what I'm taking in to this new season. And so every once in a while, Eckerd will reach out to us and say, hey, we have some needs, we need some help restocking the room. And so you've probably seen on social media and email floating around the needs list. We'll make sure we'll continue to send that out. But some of the top needs right now are baby hygiene items, new socks, and there's specific sizes listed in the list there, and teen boys' shoes. Okay, those are some of the biggest needs that they have right now. And we have all the sizes, all the details coming at you in social media and email. And so what we're going to do for this second Saturday, it's kind of twofold. We're going to have a drop-off time like we've been doing with our drive-through drop-off events from 10 to 12, where you can go out shopping this week, and then you can come out to the parking lot on Saturday from 10 to 12, and our team will be there to collect the items that you've shopped for. And then we also have a serving opportunity actually in the room in their Largo office. We normally serve in the Trinity, but it's too small to bring volunteers in there. So we're going to have a team go to the Largo office and help sort these donations, help get the room organized. Now that has to be a very small team because they can't have too many people in there. And you guys were so excited that is already full. How cool is that? You guys were ready to roll. So that team is full and ready to go. And so what I want to invite you to do is to do your shopping this week. Go get some of those items. We'll get the list to you if you still need it. And then join us from 10 to 12 to drop them off. And then we have a team that's going to take those donations right at 12, drive them to Largo, and we have another team that's going to help sort and organize the room. So it's literally going to be all day. People from our restoration community is out serving foster families in our community. So thank you for being so generous with your time and your resources. We're excited about that. If you have questions, for sure, let me know. Okay, so we are starting a whole new series about community. So I want to talk to you for a quick second about how to get connected into community, okay? You're going to be hearing all sorts of things this over the next month of why we're better together. And so I want to encourage you to take a step towards community in that process. And so we have community groups that meet throughout the week, both on Zoom, both in person, so we can find some different options that work best for you. I'd love for you to send me an email at janessa@restoretrinity.com. Would love to get you connected to that. And as always, whether you're online or in person, we've got your Connect card. On the back of your seat, there's a QR code there. You can scan that. You can let us know that you're here, how we can be praying for you. And if you're watching online, you can also find that at restoretrinity.com. But we're so excited to kick off this new series with you. And I had a fun adventure this week with my good friend Jewel, where we got to practice being better together on this special thing. Just you wait, guys. I want to be clear, it's a lot harder than it looks, okay? But I think we proved that we were better together, and so take a look at the video behind me.
Watch Jewel and Janessa try to not hate each other's guts and enjoy a bike ride together, which was really fun. And so today we are beginning, as Janessa said, a brand new series. And for this new year, this Better Together thing I think is so important. So whether you're here in person or online, as you know, usually when you look at the first thing you want to talk about in the year, you usually want to have something that you think is important or something that you think we need to talk about. And I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of things on my mind. After you finish 2020, there's a lot of things that go through your head of what we need to talk about. Let me just say this, no matter where you're at today, again, if you're in the room or if you're online, this conversation, what we're going to have over the next 5 weeks, I think is one of the most important things we can talk about right now across the board for our country, for our culture, for our city, for our community. This is critical. That we really are better together, and we've had to be in a time where we have been massively apart. For me, over the last few months, I took up some hobbies, and I've talked about this before, and I promise you I'm not going to show a slideshow or make this super boring or anything like that. But I just want to tell you real quickly, one of the things I took up over the last few weeks, or over the last few months, is cycling. And I decided I was going to get out and ride bikes more, and I was going to spend time outside because that's something we could do. And I had some friends who were like, you should come ride bikes. Now, I had never really cycled before. This wasn't something I knew about. I had ridden bicycles, but I didn't know there was a difference between cycling and bicycling. There's a whole another world of things. So some friends were like, grab a bike and come meet us, and we'll go ride out of Starkey up through Starkey Park. And I remember my first day, I went and just picked up a bike from a friend who is a bike retailer. He actually helped me get a hold of this beauty right here. And let me tell you, this thing is not easy to ride. And if you couldn't tell in the video, there are no brakes. You just got to coast until it kind of dies and then put your feet down. It's a lot of fun. But anyways, I went to my friend who has bikes, and I was like, hey, I just need a road bike. I really don't think it matters what it is. I think I can take anything you got. And so he found this old steel road bike, and he was like, does this work? And I was like, I think so. I didn't really ride it, didn't really try it out. Turns out it was not big enough for me at all. It was like a clown riding a bike. Anyways, I went ahead and just put it in my car, took it over, and I met up with these guys to go ride. Now, there were a few surprises that day that I was not ready for. One was, as I showed up, I thought it won't be a big deal if I wear normal human clothes. Because I thought I really don't want to wear the spandex situation that goes along with cycling. And there's no way other guys want to wear that either, right? So I just showed up and I was like, surely everybody's wearing shorts and t-shirts. And I was wrong. I was wrong about that. there's a good reason people wear very tight clothes is because, as it turns out, I was wearing like a very baggy shirt that was long sleeve and shorts. And I will just say I was like a sail. Like the wind was just coming at me. I could not move. There's a reason that happened. Secondly, I didn't know that you had to have your feet clipped into the pedals. I thought you just put your tennis shoes on top of those pedals and it just worked. Meanwhile, the whole time we're riding, my feet are just sliding off these pedals. And third, again, the bike was not the right height. Apparently that matters a lot. And I look like Lurch on a child's bike. It was not pretty. Kevin, were you there that day? Do you remember this? I was near the other riders. They were riding. I was somewhat near them. I kept getting dropped, as it's called, kept falling behind because I was ill-equipped for this moment. And what you think you want is you want the best riders, you want all the people who are ready to go, you want all the best people together. But I remember as I kept falling behind and kept falling behind and kept falling behind, one of my friends came back, Dr. Serrano, many of you know him, he's probably watching online right now. As he came back, he started to back up to find me. And he had to drop back from the group, from the as it's called, a Peleton. From the group, he dropped back from them and started to find me. And when he came back to where I was, he looked back at me and he goes, "Tuck in." I didn't know what that meant. And he was like, "No, tuck in, just tuck in." And I was riding next to him. And I kept riding up next to him side by side because here was my other assumption, is that my assumption was we were not riding with one another, we were racing against one another. My assumption was this is a man sport, besides the spandex. My assumption was we are going to go and my speed is going to be as fast as I can go. Your speed's going to be as fast as you can go. And we will just work opposite one another to go the same course at the speed that we can achieve separately. But when he came back and he was saying, "Tuck in," what he was actually telling me is he was saying, "Get behind me." And finally I asked him, I was like, "What does that mean? I don't know what tuck in means." He said, "Put your front tire right behind my back tire." And when I did that, suddenly we started moving much, much faster together. Actually, some studies would say that when you do this, that the person in front of you, having a rider in front of you, will block from 20 to up to 50% of the wind coming your way, reducing your energy by up to 50%. How hard you have to pedal, how hard you have to work. Because there's somebody else with you, suddenly you don't have to work as hard. You can literally reduce the amount of speed you have to put into it, and yet you're going faster than you were before. Meanwhile, he literally caught us back up to the group because we were riding not against one another, we were riding with one another. See, there's something about this that I think we have a hard time in America with, and I just want to say, culturally, we are built to be people who race against, not people who ride with. That's just how we're built. We're built in an individualistic culture that has been founded this way for literally hundreds of years. I had a week off, and so I had a lot of time to read, so get ready for some book reports. But I'm just going to warn you, I apologize. But in the book Tribe, if you haven't read this book, Tribe, it is fantastic. And we're going to go through some other books as well as this. But in this book, Tribe, a man named Sebastian Junger, he starts to talk about where America really began its idea of individualism. While we talk about being one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, we also find ourselves as one of the most individualistic cultures in the world, where I go as far as I can go, you go as far as you can go. And if it's not the same distance, that's fine, because we're not built for community, we were built for individualism. And actually, he goes all the way back, and I'm sorry, I'm now one of those people who reads on their iPad. I don't like me either, don't worry. I'd rather have a book, a physical copy, but this is so much lighter. But I want to get this right, because I'm going to have to quote Benjamin Franklin. You don't want to get that wrong, that's a big deal. But in this book, he starts talking about the beginnings of America, the very foundations of America, right around the Revolution, when we start to see America become its own thing. And what's interesting is a phenomenon starts to happen. While you have Europeans, and you had these people who were settlers, you had another group of people, the people who were indigenous to the country, right? People who were living here already. And what was interesting is there was a phenomenon happening at this time that is documented by many authors, but we'll cover a couple, where people would leave the European side of things. The Europeans would actually leave their own people to go and live with the indigenous people. They would actually leave to go live in these tribes or in these cultures with other people, maybe even communities, if you will. They started to leave and go towards this. But what's interesting is there was never a documented case of the opposite happening. Never were people that were here as indigenous people, did they ever go and join into the culture and the tribe of those who were European. In fact, a man named Hector de Creveur, he wrote this in 1792. He said, thousands of Europeans are and Indians, and again, I know it's not a PC term anymore. This is written in the 1700s. But he said, and we have no examples of even one of the Aboriginals having come from choice to become a European. Nobody's ever done that. Meanwhile, Ben Franklin wrote this. He said, but many of those people, they were then out with their friends and they went to be a part of the Aboriginal community. And he said, but many of them were ransomed by their friends. Like, we brought them back. And they would become disgusted with our manner of life and take the first good opportunity to escape again into the woods. Europeans did not want to be a part of this way of life. Something about it was not attractive. Meanwhile, something about the indigenous community was attractive to them. And so this Creveur man writes again, he's a French journalist at this time who was writing about all of the revolution, and this is what he wrote. There must be something in their social bond that is singularly captivating and far superior to anything to be boasted of among us. Something in their social bond, something the European people were seeing in the social bond of these people was so much stronger. And what is argued is from this point, Americans had already decided they were a tribal community, and we're going to talk about this in a second, a tribal place, not a community place. They had decided that it was an individualistic community, and these people were even finding that they could go and be a part of a real community and leave the bonds of this fake community, this tribe that they were a part of, and go be a part of these other communities. And we start to see this happen in 1831. We see other writers start to write about the democracy of America and how this would become the first thing that it's known for is that America is an individualistic culture. It's one of its strongest points, but it will also become one of its weakest points. A man named Tocqueville, he wrote a 4-part docu-series, essentially, of what was happening in the American Revolution. And what he wrote about is, as America's democracy, he said this will become one of its greatest strengths, but also one of its greatest weaknesses, is the individualism of this culture. And what's interesting is that actually we kind of kept our noses clean for quite a while. We did pretty well. And all the way through World War II, we started to see America actually become a more communal place where things were working out pretty well. But it wasn't until really when we hit World War II. In World War II, we start to see this massive divide, right? And you guys know this if you've read anything like, if you've ever read, there's one called Bowling Alone. It's a great book called Bowling Alone. And it's about how basically our culture, all of our attachments have faded. So there used to be a day where you would go be a part of a bowling club is what the guy's writing about. It's kind of interesting. You'd go be a part of your bowling team. You'd be a part of these communities. And you would commit to something and you'd do it. I don't know the last time that you committed to a community of something and you did it. As generations go, we're starting to become less and less in tune with that. Church attendance by itself, right now, since World War II, the end of World War II, really that generation around 1950, when that ended, we are now at half of church attendance from where we were in 1950. Literally half the amount of church attendance. Now, there are more people in America, yet we are at half the attendance. Why is it? People don't think it's actually just the decline of religion. That is part of it. So people don't think that it's just necessarily that people are having a hard time with God or with Jesus or whatever. Actually, most of the studies say that people just have a hard time committing to community. We have a hard time with this. Planning Center. Anybody use Planning Center in this room where we actually send you invitations to come and serve, that kind of thing? It's an online database that we use to ask people to serve here in church. They did a study worldwide on all of their platforms for people who were asked to serve in the church. And what they did was they asked, they looked around the whole world of who would actually respond to the requests and actually click on the buttons. And they found that the younger you are, the less likely you are to commit even to the Sunday that's coming up. So let's say that somebody sent you an email on a Thursday and said, could you serve this Sunday? The younger you are, the less likely you are to say, yes, I will be there, because commitment is hard for us. Committing to a community is hard for us. Why? Because we can change course at any moment. I could get a text that says, but we have something else going on Sunday, and suddenly I'm like, nah, I'm out. I was going to go to that, but I'm good now. I'm going to go do something else, right? This is how quickly things move, but because of that, we become less committal. We become less committed to community. And we see this happen throughout, really, again, through World War II, we see kind of the urbanization of things, but then we see kind of the suburbanization of things. And this individualistic culture is building and building to where we are today, which, by the way, is the most individualistic, but also the most isolated culture that we've ever been in. We are now in a full-on loneliness culture. It is a full loneliness culture. We've seen the fruition of all these things come together to the point where we are now in the loneliest culture we've ever been in. I don't know if you saw what happened in the UK just 2 years ago when Theresa May, she announced that for the first time the UK would have a loneliness minister. They actually set up an entire department in their government for loneliness. And while that sounds crazy, the US is actually doing worse than the UK. I mean, we are in terrible shape. Right now in the US, 35% of people in the United States say that they are chronically lonely. In the 1980s, the average person would say they had 3 close confidants. Today, that number is 0. The average person in America has 0 close confidants. We are at an epidemic of this. It's taking a toll on our culture. It's also taking a toll on us physically. If you've ever seen the studies on this, Forbes magazine did a fascinating study. This is from Forbes, where they found that isolation physically takes a toll on their body, on your body. Loneliness takes a toll on your body to the point that they said chronic loneliness has the same effect on your body as smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day. In fact, our last Surgeon General, he actually said from a Harvard Business Review column that he wrote, he said that in his time as the Surgeon General, this was in 2014, 2017, he wrote that in his time as a Surgeon General, the number one pathology he saw was not heart disease and it was not any diabetes. He said the number one pathology he saw was loneliness. We fully have arrived as a culture in a lonely generation. And actually the studies show that Generation Z will be the loneliest generation to ever walk the face of the planet, which is fascinating considering we have more technology, we have more ways to connect, and we'll get to that in a little while. We have more ways to think that we are connected than ever before, yet we are at a full loneliness place. This individualism has become an isolation that has become a loneliness. And what I want us to look at, and all those studies, all those stats I just gave you, by the way, are pre-pandemic. Who knows what's going to happen after this? But what I think we need to talk about, and this is, again, whether you're online or you're here in person, this is critical for us to talk about because I believe, and this isn't just me, this comes from the scripture, this comes from the Bible, this comes from Jesus himself, that we are better together. That we are designed, we are created to be in community. And over the next 5 weeks, you're going to see a few different angles of that. We're going to talk about that in different ways. But today, I just want to do a really cursory look at Jesus building community. What did it look like for Jesus to put together a community? What did it look like? What was he doing with his community? And we'll just kind of take, again, it's going to be a very broad look at that. It might not be much of a sermon. I apologize. But I want to look at that and at least kind of get a feel for what he did before we go into the next few weeks and looking at how we can apply that to ourselves. So we're going to start. I'm going to warn you, we're going to kind of jump through a few different places in the book of Matthew. We're going to start in Matthew chapter 4. If you have a Bible or a phone or whatever, you're welcome to turn there. I would love for you to follow along so you know that I'm not making things up too much. So Matthew chapter 4, and we're going to be right in, let's see here, verse 18. So verse 18, chapter 4, Jesus is beginning his ministry. This is actually the first thing he does in ministry. Jesus is 30 years old. He has done all of his rabbi schooling. He is now on his own and is starting his ministry. This is the first thing he does in verse 18. As Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw 2 brothers. Just for a quick second, that 2 matters, and we'll come back to this in just a second. 2 brothers. There's Simon called Peter, and also there's one more person, his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. Come follow me, Jesus said, and I will send you out to fish for people. And then it says, at once they left their nets and followed him. By the way, Jesus, this is just a complete tangent, but Jesus isn't making like a bad pun there saying, I'll make you fish for people like you're fishers now. I'll make you fish for people. Like it's not, this was an idiom in the first century that was actually used by philosophers and poets and stuff. And it basically meant like, I'll make you captivate people around you. I will make you a sage like I'm a sage. He was a rabbi. He's saying like, I'll make you wise. I'll make you interesting. I'll make you be that guy. So like, that's what he's saying there. He's not like throwing out some bad pun. Jesus is smarter than that. And so he's saying this to them, like, I'll help you captivate the hearts of your generation. And at once they left their nets and they followed him. Notice right off the bat, just real quickly, not every rabbi would do what Jesus just did. Many rabbis would only take on 1 disciple at a time. How many did he take on right off the bat? 2. Jesus starts with community. Right off the bat. He doesn't just take one dude and say, I got my person now and we're good. Many rabbis still to this day take on one person at a time. Jesus took on two, Peter and his brother Andrew, both of them. And then he goes further from there. He continues on down the shore, and it says right after that, very next verse, going on from there, he saw two other brothers. He's picking them up two at a time, like he's Noah or something, right? He's going just right down the shore, taking two at a time. James, the son of Zebedee, and his brother John. They were in a boat with their father Zebedee, preparing their nets. Jesus called them, and immediately they left the boat and their father and followed him. Now, here's what's interesting, again, really quickly. You would think that Jesus would want the best riders around him. He'd want the best of the group. He'd want the best people he could possibly get. You would think that he would want the most educated or the wisest or whatever. At this moment, we see right off the bat, Jesus picks kind of the worst of the bunch. Remember this, when you were a boy in the Jewish culture, you would go to a school called Bet Talmud. Jesus went to this school. Every young boy went to this school. It was like a primary school for Jewish boys. And if you were smart, if you were good at Bet Talmud, you would be chosen by a rabbi, and they would send you to like a secondary school for this religious education. And then a rabbi would pick you up and basically say, like, now you're my disciple, you're my apprentice, right? That would be the next step. Notice that these guys are old enough to have gone through Bet Talmud. However, they are not being pursued by a rabbi. Where have they gone? They went back to their parents' businesses. This is like those kids that never left your high school, right? Like they come back every homecoming and every other football game and they just kind of stay there. That's what's happening there. These are those guys that you're like, no, we should have kind of kept moving, but they didn't because they weren't good enough. The truth is, Peter, James, John, Andrew, these guys were not good enough by any other rabbi's opinion for them to have been picked up and taken as apprentices. Jesus goes to the shore, and notice it says they're even out fishing with their fathers. They're doing the family business, and those are the people Jesus wants. So Jesus starts a community with people that you and I might think are not the people we want. What we want in our group, what we want in our community is people who have power. We want people who have prestige, or we want people who are just a lot like us. If we're being honest, that's one of the biggest things we want, is we want people who are like us. And Jesus doesn't go for the people who are just like him. These guys didn't make it as far as he did. These guys didn't have the education he had, yet he comes to them and says, I will make you like me. I will make you fishers of men. I will make you sage. I will make you wise. I will make you captivate the hearts of your generation. I can do that. And so he picks up right off the bat, and again, notice the number of people. Jesus himself lives in community. If there is no other reason for you to have a community around you, let me just tell you, this is it. If you follow Jesus, look at his life, the very first thing he does is he makes a community. Just point blank. That's as simple as it can get right there. I don't think I have to make much more of a case about why we should do this, but we'll continue on. So after that, let's skip over just a couple chapters here. Right after this, in Matthew chapter 8, we're going to be in chapter 8, verse 18. We've talked about this verse before, but Jesus is now out and he's teaching, he's doing miracles. And it says this in verse 18 of chapter 8. When Jesus saw the crowd around him, he gave orders to cross to the other side of the lake, so he sends the disciples away. But then a teacher of the law came to him. This is a prestigious man. This is a man who would actually be like the best of the best. A teacher of the law is a very reputable person. And the teacher of the law says, Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go. That sounds really good, doesn't it? Like you would think Jesus would be like, great, let's do it. Like sign him up, whatever it takes, we're going to get this guy on board. Instead, Jesus is not a great salesman. This is what he says. Foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. We talked about this in a series not long ago called No Turning Back. I would encourage you to go back and look at this because I think it's a very big political statement Jesus is making here. But what he's also trying to tell him is, listen, if you follow me, you might be a prestigious man right now, but my kingdom is not of this world. My kingdom does not have places for you to stay. It does not have hospitable things. It's going to be a rough go. And it doesn't say what the man did. Notice that. But then it says to the next thing, another disciple, so another person came up to him right after and said, Lord, first let me go and bury my father. Now, this isn't just saying that he has to literally go put his father in the ground. Probably what this means is that his dad was dying and he needed to go be at his bedside because it probably means he was going to get the inheritance from his father. And this makes sense. He'd be like, this is fiscally responsible. I need to go show up, get my inheritance, then I'll come follow you. He probably thinks he's doing the right thing. And what Jesus says is, follow me and let the dead bury their own dead. Now, notice this just really quickly. As Jesus is building a community, there are some people who are just with him. There's some people that aren't. Some people choose not to be. Now, there's questions about why this is, but one of the most interesting things about this verse to me at the end of this passage is, if you notice, it never tells us what the men decided to do. It doesn't say if they said, okay, like, we'll just follow you then. It doesn't say what they decided to do. Some scholars believe that Matthew does this because what he's doing is he's putting this out there for us to decide. Putting ourselves in the story, what would we do if we were asked to join this community? How would we decide? Would we say, yes, okay, well then I'll move on from that inheritance. Yes, I'll move on from the wealth I have. Yes, I'll move on from my family or the things that are holding me back, whatever that might be. Or would we say, no, I'm going to stay put? We never know their answer. The question is, would we know our own answer? Because joining this community means that there's going to be things that you give up. Jesus doesn't downplay it. Joining community means it might be difficult. Community is not always easy. We'll get into this more in a couple weeks, but let me just tell you, as an introvert, and I am an introvert, community is not always the easiest thing. I would actually say it's a discipline. There are times where I know I need to be in community. There are times where I know it is a choice I have to make. There are times where I know that it's best for me as well as for the people around me. But that doesn't mean it's always the easiest thing. Jesus puts it out there. You can join our community. This is what it's going to take. And people may or may not have turned him down. We might or might not have turned him down. Because community is not always actually easy. We have this idea of a utopian thing where it's always perfect and easy and we just get together and laugh and it's all, perfect. We have great snacks. We don't have the picture in our heads where we might have to do things differently. Where what if we have to go into a home and what if, oh man, or what if we even had to come to church and wear a mask? I mean, watch yourself. These colors don't run, We have that idea, don't we? What if it was uncomfortable to be in community? Or what if even Jesus was saying it might be uncomfortable for you to be in community? Just saying. So he goes from there, and he adds more people to his community. Watch. So we're going to go over to chapter 9. Just flip the page here. Chapter 9. Chapter 9, verse 9. This is what it says. As Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. This would not have been a place you recruit disciples from. He goes to a tax collector's booth and says, "Follow me," he told him, and Matthew got up and he followed him. This is not a place to recruit people from. This is not where you go. Why? Because tax collectors were considered the worst of the worst. There were like sinners. In fact, if you read the Bible, you'll see this all the time. It'll say there were sinners and tax collectors. Like they were their own rung of really bad. And we still see it that way, right? There's sinners and there's the IRS. Like we still have that opinion, right? So, I mean, it's like that bad. Like there's sinners and there's tax collectors. And so for Jesus to go to a tax collector, see what had happened here is Matthew was a Jewish man. And he now decided as a Jewish man, he would abandon his own people and start working for Rome, for the man, right? He's working for the man every night and day. And his job now is to take money from the Jewish people and give it to Rome. Imagine one of your own people betraying you in this way and now taking all of your money and giving it to the authorities that you don't even like, the people you don't even want to be around. That's what Matthew is to them. And Jesus walks up to this guy who nobody else wants to be around, and all of a sudden he says, "Follow me," and he just does. It says he got up and followed him. It says in verse 10, while Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, which is a whole nother thing, that he would even go there and have dinner with Matthew and his tax collector friends. Many tax collectors and sinners, notice again, two rungs of bad people, and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. When Pharisees saw this, they asked the disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" On hearing this, Jesus said, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, comes out of Hosea 6:6. For I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners, which is a beautiful line by Jesus. But notice what Jesus does. He goes to a person that nobody else would have gone to. He picks up a man who nobody else wanted in their community. I guarantee that. And he puts him in his community. But notice the dichotomy of what's going to happen. So I want you just to go real quickly over to the next chapter, chapter 10, verse 1, right? Okay, we're going to look at this really quickly because I want you to see what Matthew is up against. It says this: Jesus called his 12 disciples to him and gave them authority to drive out impure spirits and to heal every disease and sickness. And then it says, these are the names of the 12 apostles. First, there's Simon, who's called Peter, and his brother Andrew. Then James, the son of Zebedee, and his brother John. It kind of, I don't know if it's fun to be like the second brother. It feels like, you know what I mean? Like these guys don't get a lot of credit. It's like there's like the good one, and then there's the other guy too, and he's nearby. Anyways, then it says, and Philip and Bartholomew and Thomas and Matthew, the tax collector. So there's Matthew. Matthew made it in. Matthew, and still notice the moniker he has. The tax collector stays with him. And then it says James, son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus. Simon the Zealot, verse 4, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. Simon the Zealot. So really quickly, we could get into, we've done it before. There's a whole series we did also on the disciples. But I just want to, real quickly, I want to just look at the two who have monikers here, because that's an interesting thing. So you have Luke, who is the tax collector, and you have Simon the Zealot. Remember this, Simon the Zealot. So the Zealots were a group of people who were Jewish men who hated Rome. In fact, there was a movie just a couple years ago that came out about them called Dagger Men. And actually what they would do is they would keep daggers in their cloaks at all times. And if a Roman soldier was unprepared or not watching, they would slide out of the shadows and they would slit the throat of that Roman soldier. And then they would hide back into the crowd. They did this not once, like a lot of times. They were zealots. They were an uprising within the Roman culture. They were a Jewish sect who really believed that they should not be under Roman oppression. They were literally killing Romans as often as they could. So imagine you have Simon the Zealot who is killing Romans, people who work for Rome, and in the same group, you have Luke who is on the payroll of Rome. Like you thought your Christmas dinner with your in-laws was awkward. Imagine these guys every morning for coffee or whatever they have to do. For 3 years traveling together, they would have a man who was killing Romans and people who worked for Rome. Meanwhile, there was another man who worked for Rome in the same 12. Jesus put this together on purpose. I mean, it would be like, I don't know how to even describe it in our terms. It would be like if you took like Sean Hannity or some personality, like a right-wing person, Ben Shapiro type person, and you had them and you only had 12 people to hang out with. And there was this dude, and then on the other side you were like, and also I invited somebody else to come with us. Her name's AOC is what they call her, and she's going to come chill with us for a while. We're all going to travel together, and we're going to spread the kingdom of God under one roof. And actually on this, I'm just going to say, this is like to a power of 5 or 10 or something. I mean, they're killing one another. And they are traveling together. Jesus chose on purpose these two diametrically opposed foes. Think about that for a second. That is a huge thing. Huge. What it shows me, I mean, there's a ton of things we could take away from this. One of the things I take away from this all the time is that community should be diverse. Here's what's happened, and here's what individualism has gotten us. It's got us a tribe and not a community. There's a difference between tribes and communities. Tribes are about what they are against. They have a shared enemy. Meanwhile, communities are about what they are for. There's a great book called The Second Mountain by a guy named David Burns. He writes for the New York Times, but he also writes about community and kind of the lack of it right now in our culture. And he writes about this quite a bit, where he says that there are tribes, and tribes are about what they are against, where communities are what they are for. Tribes are about a scarcity mindset, where communities are about a generosity. I mean, you can identify a tribe because they unite against a common hatred where a community unites around a common love of something. And I think for the most part, I would argue the church has become a tribe and not a community. We are more known for what we hate than what we love. We are sometimes more known for what we are against than what we are for. And sometimes our communities, our relationships look the same way, where we gather around a common enemy or a common hatred instead of gathering around a common cause. There's a huge difference between a community and a tribe. And what Jesus is building here is a community. It's not a tribe. He has people in there that would disagree with one another. I guarantee they disagreed with him. And I think he encouraged it. I think there is a huge misnomer in our culture, in churches, in communities, that we are supposed to, if you go to a church, you are supposed to agree with that pastor, that leadership, that whatever, 100%. And the moment you don't, the moment that 100% drops to like 98%, you're like, well, I'm going to go to another church. We do this in our culture all the time. And I think that there's something to be said for a community that can disagree on the certain things, but can also unite around what they are for. Look at Jesus' own tribe, his own community, his own people that he put around him. Their disagreements would have been massive about politics, about humanitarian things, about how they handled their own day-to-day lives. I guarantee you they would have had massive disagreements. Yet Jesus chose them around a common cause, which was bringing the kingdom of heaven to earth. If the church would unite around a common cause and not worry about what it is so against, I think we would have a community and not a bunch of tribes. And sometimes that's what community looks like. I will tell you in our church, I don't know if you know this or not, we have Janessa and I on staff most of the time doing most of the things around here. And I will say, I don't know if you know this or not, we don't agree on everything. We're not like identically similar people. I don't know if you've noticed or not, Janessa's not an introvert at all. And some of us are. And so it can be a very difficult thing sometimes to see the world the same way. There are other things that we don't always agree on. Is that bad? Does that mean that we should not be in the same community? No, it actually probably means we should be. This last year, we for the first time got to have an elder board in our church. We kind of had to do a management team for a long time, which was an outside leadership thing as we planted. But inside our church, we've been able to have an elder board. And I had people that I went to say, would you be an elder in our church? And they actually told me, but I know I've been a squeaky wheel about a couple things, and I don't know if you want to have somebody in there who's going to kind of challenge things or bring up things that we might not agree with. I was like, so I just want a board of yes men. That's what we're going to create, is just everybody who thinks like me and does things like me. Yeah, that doesn't sound healthy. No, I want you there because you'll challenge those things, because you'll bring up those things. This is something that I think we've missed. There's some romanticized version of community that we've missed out on, where we think that it has to be that we are 100% in agreement about every earthly issue. And what matters is not the earthly issue. What matters is the heavenly issue. Are we in agreement on that? Then I think we've got enough. And Jesus pulls together this community of mismatched people, and he makes a community out of them. And they're not the most powerful. They're not the most prestigious, and they're not even just people who are like them. They're wildly different. I want to look at one more spot. We're going to skip ahead. Matthew 20, chapter 20. There's a moment where Jesus has a conversation that I think is just interesting if you read it in this context. So what happens in Matthew chapter 20, it's verse 20, so 2020. I know we don't talk about that number anymore. It's all over and gone. We try to wipe that out. But 20, verse 20 says this: the mother of Zebedee's sons, so James and John, they came to Jesus with her sons, and kneeling down, she asked a favor to him. So she's like really begging, really making a big statement here for her sons. And she says to Jesus, he asks her, what is it you want? And she says, grant that one of these two sons of mine may sit at your right and the other at your left in your kingdom. So she's saying, like, I want one to be the, vice president, one to be the secretary of state or whatever in the kingdom of heaven. Would you make them like that? She still sees the kingdom, like most people do, Most people at this time saw Jesus coming as a king who would take over Rome, and he would now be an earthly king. She sees it that way. I don't think she sees it as a heavenly thing. I think she's saying, like, no, literally, would you put him in your cabinet? I would like for them to be important in the government. And Jesus says, you don't know what you are asking. Jesus said to them, can you drink the cup I am going to drink? We can, they answered. Jesus said to them, you will indeed drink from my cup. Now, both of them actually are martyred later on in their life. Maybe that's what he's referring to there. You will indeed drink from my cup. But to sit at my right hand or my left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those to whom they have been given and prepared for by my Father. So when the other group, when the 10 heard about this, they were indignant with the two brothers. Indignant here in the Greek, by the way, is like a word that I'm not allowed to say from the stage. Like they're real mad. And they are so upset because these two men are trying to levy position within their community. They're trying to now start to build something where they are now more important than others. Again, they're looking for the power. They're looking for prestige. They're looking for people who are like them. They're gonna grow their influence in this community. And they're so mad. And Jesus then calls them all together. This is one of the few times that we see Jesus literally call all 12 and have a little huddle, where he has this one conversation where it's almost like they're going to put their hands in the middle, they're going to break on team, they're going to go win the game. He calls them together, and this is what he tells them. You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. See what he's saying? He's saying, you know how the world works. You know how the world handles community. You know that the world is more tribal than they are communal. You know that about them. You see that, right? That's what he's saying. Notice how the Gentiles lord it over them. They exercise authority over them. They are more about what they are against than what they are for. He says, you see all that, but then notice verse 26. Not so with you. Not this group. It's not going to happen here. That's how the world's going to handle it. That's how the world will do things. But that does not happen here. That's not going to happen in our community. This is different. You see what he's calling out of them? It's a different conversation. We are not like them. We are not jockeying for position. We are not trying to have authority over one another. We are not trying to say that we have to all even agree on everything. We will be able to do that within this community. He's saying, not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must separate, must isolate themselves. They must split off. Whoever wants to be great should probably go and be the individual, right? They should probably go, and they should go as far as they can go and leave everybody else behind. That's what the greatest among you should do. No, he says, no, the greatest among you should be your servant. The greatest among you should be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave, just as the Son of Man did. And he did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. He's saying this is going to be different than what you're used to. This is going to be different than what you know. This is community. This is not a tribe. It's something different here. Now, real quick, I want to just do a couple things before we get further into the series that I just want to kind of debunk a couple quick things here. I want to talk about, first of all, do not confuse connectivity with community. Connectivity is not the same as community. So we live in a digital world right now. I understand that, and that's great. And there's some really good things about the fact that we can meet online and we can meet via Zoom and all that kind of stuff. I'm for that. Don't get me wrong. Again, physical distancing is not the problem here. But what we sometimes substitute for community is connectivity, thinking that we are connected with one another. So I like just literally yesterday, I had a friend who was using, you guys know Cameo? Have you seen Cameo, the app where you can like hire a celebrity to tell your friend happy birthday? So you can get like Chuck Norris, you pay him like $1,000, he'll send a 30-second video to your friend and be like, happy birthday or Merry Christmas. And you pay him like a bunch of money and they'll do that. You can get, I'm sure you can find, like all the non-important Kardashians on there or whatever. And you can like have them send a video message to your friend. And what's interesting is you're paying somebody, you can pay like an Arnold Schwarzenegger lookalike to send your friend a video, or you can pay an actual celebrity that you've seen on shows or whatever. You can have them send a video to your friend. And the word they use on Cameo that's interesting to me is they say, connect with. Connect with. Like you are connecting with that celebrity. I want to be really clear, that's not connection. You're paying them money for them to send you a video. There is no conversation back and forth. You're not FaceTiming with them. You're not doing Zoom. It's a video. In our world, we sometimes confuse connectivity because we are so connected all the time with actual conversation. There are studies upon studies showing right now, by the way, 8% of people in the last year, 8% have had a conversation with their neighbor. 8% just in the U.S. We've confused conversation with connectivity, thinking that connectivity is going to keep us in this place where we're in good spirits and we have community. It is not community. It's not the same thing. What we find ourselves doing, there are studies on this that are really interesting, but again, you can find yourself clicking like on people's photos so much or scrolling through things, and what you're doing is you're connecting with that person that you sat in third period with in middle school who lives in Nebraska now, and you're connecting with them that way. Meanwhile, there are people right next to you that you could have conversation with, and we're using our time to connect with those who we're never going to conversate with. Does that make sense? Now, I'm not saying you can't have conversation over the internet. That is possible. That is possible. But the difference is that it's conversation. We've lost the art of conversation. In conversation, by the way, you learn a couple things. But one of the biggest things, you learn empathy in conversation. It's something that only comes through conversation. Learning empathy for one another, learning how to actually listen and care for one another only happens in conversation. This is one of the reasons that and you're going to hear from Gary next week, from Gary Wood. Gary Wood, this is one of the reasons that we ask him specifically as a member of our community who is a mental health counselor. He's licensed in that. We wanted to make it so that our community, our church, as well as the city around us would be able to have mental health counseling after we come out of this. Because I'll tell you, I think the physical detriments of loneliness are one thing, of smoking so many cigarettes a day or whatever it feels like in your body. The physical detriments are one thing, but I would say the emotional detriment of what we're going through in this isolated time, in this loneliness time, is going to have repercussions, I think, for years, maybe decades. Some people may never fully come back to quite what we call normal right now. And so we asked Gary if he would work with us. Gary is going to open up hours every week that we are going to pay for. The church, you guys gave very generously to this, and we are going to be able to fund that. We're going to have a small copay just so people show up. But we're going to have a small copay that will go back into the fund to make sure that we have counseling for people, marriages, for people who are individuals, people who are kids, students, whatever, to be able to have a place where they can have conversation, even if it's over the internet, but they will have conversation with somebody, because that is so, so important, because we have confused connectivity with conversation with community. It's not the same thing. The other thing, let me just really quickly hit on this real quick. We have confused, I think, community with chemistry. So I have a friend, I just got to see him this week. I have a friend named Dan. Dan, I remember the first day we met. Dan was in my house. It was a Christmas party. Dan was just finishing college. I think he was 23 at the time. I was 26. And I see Dan in my house, and Dan looked super cool. Like, he was wearing a plaid shirt. It was flannel. He had on Levi's and shoes with no socks, and I was like, that guy looks awesome. He had long hair, he had a beard, and he wasn't like trying too hard, like he wasn't like one of those people. And I thought, he looks like me, like in a cool way. All the best attributes of me are on him pretty much. And so I saw him in the house, and I was like, this guy seems cool. Like, seems like a guy I could hang out with. Went over and talked to him. Super nice guy. Started talking about books we had read. Both of us read the same books. Started talking about music. We both were, like, at the time, big into Death Cab for Cutie, and we were chatting about that. And he was, like, super into it. I was into it. What's the best album? We were having all this conversation, and we're instantly being like, this guy and I, we click. Like, we're good friends. We click. I got to see him this last week, and it was like nothing ever changed. We haven't seen each other in years. I saw him, and it was just awesome to be able to see him. And those people that you just pick right up with, and you just keep talking, and it's like nothing ever changed. It was great. And Dan's always going to be one of those guys for me. Dan is one of my closest friends. He interned for me. He later actually took my job. I kind of moved out of that position and gave that to him. He's been an incredible friend. We've had a lot of deep conversations. We continue to be great friends. But here's the thing. Dan lives in Knoxville. And I don't know why, because I don't know why anybody lives in Knoxville. Some people just make bad choices. But he lives in Knoxville. Dan is actually not part of my community. Dan is one of my friends. I know this may sound weird. Sometimes you find the overlap, but sometimes they're actually different. But if you, like, just throw out an example here, but one of the people in my community that I love dearly, who's here, is, and she couldn't be here this morning, but is, most of you would know her by the name Mama Bracy. If you were to stack me and Mama Bracy up, just from her name alone, you would probably think we are not in the same, like, geopolitical world. We are not in the same socioeconomic world. We are not in the same demographic. She is slightly older than me. I won't say a lot because that's not nice. She's slightly older than me. She comes from a very different part of the world than I come from. She has lived a lot more life than I've had. She's a grandparent. I'm barely a parent at the best. She's done all these things that I haven't done. Would you think like, oh, those two, chemistry-wise, are best friends and in community? We are not necessarily going to always going to be best friends, but we are absolutely in community with one another. We spend time with her. We have walked through mourning and grieving for her and for us together. I mean, it's great when chemistry and community overlap, and hopefully they do. I'm not saying they shouldn't, but I'm also saying that sometimes community is not just a Venn diagram with two overlapping circles of chemistry and community. Because if it was, by the way, it would be a really bad thing for the church as a community. I remember when we started this church, I remember like literally people coming to me and being like, so we're probably too old to come to your church. They would tell me this. So like, we want to come, we would love to be there, but we're probably too old, like we're not your demographic. No, we want you there too, because who is going to pass down wisdom? Who is going to be cared for? Who's going to be able to have those things from a younger generation? My hope is that we had all generations in the same building at the same time. We never wanted this to be one or the other. That is, again, a tribe. That is not a community. I want to make sure we cover those bases, because I think we sometimes confuse those things. In fact, in the Greek, the word that's in the Bible is the word koinonia. Look at your neighbor, say koinonia. Look, just koinonia. I want you to catch that word, because it's not about chemistry. It's not about connectedness. What it's about is about koinonia. Koinonia simply means to have in common with one another. Webster's dictionary actually defines community as people with a common interest living in one place. That is actually part of their definition. Common interest, living in one place. That is why people riding bikes together is community. That is why people, baking things together is community, or sewing things together is community. That's why CrossFit's a community. I mean, it's a cult, but it's also a community and stuff. It's why these things are community, is because they are people with a shared interest in one place. That is what makes us a community, is we are in one place and we have a shared interest, whether it's fully that you are committed to Christ, or even you just have a curiosity about Christ. That is the one thing that has us held together as a community. That's what makes us better together. A few weeks ago, Kevin, you'll remember this, we were in, I decided to do a longer ride than I had done before. And so I got together with some guys and we went to go ride bikes. And we went up to Brooksville, and there was a thing called the Hilly 100. And it was supposed to go 100 miles. We did 100 kilometers, we ended up about 66 miles, because 100 miles sounded like a long time of hills. But I'll never forget, as we got there, and there were about 200 riders, not just the handful of us that had come together. There were about 200 riders. And as we took off out of the pack, I'll never forget, like it felt, because there were so many riders and so many people around you in this Peleton and in this group, that I remember we were flying. We were going like 28, 30 miles an hour, and it felt effortless because you had such a big group around you. You had so many people around you. There's a power in that Peleton. There's a power in community. There is something that needs to happen. And I really believe, I'm not just saying this, that we are better together, and we will be better together. But we have to make the commitment to be together. Even at times it might be uncomfortable or inconvenient, that it's a commitment to being together. So today, I don't know what that looks like for you, and over the next few weeks, we're going to have a lot more options for you to get involved and to have a community. We still have Bible studies for guys, for women, for couples. We have all of that going on. You'll hear more about that in 2 weeks. But I want you to get involved in one of those things, even if it's just over Zoom. It is better than not being together at this point, having real conversation. Maybe you need to get somebody in this room that you need to sit down with and you need to have conversation weekly or even daily of whatever it is that I want to read the Bible this year or I want to do whatever it is, that you have people that you're committed to. I would encourage you to find those places and those ways to be connected, be committed to a community for the next coming months. If you would, let's stand together. I talked way too long. We're going to pray, and I hope that you'll be back here next week to hear from Gary and hear about kind of this mental health stuff that we're getting into and why that's so important for our community. And then the next week, we're going to talk about different forms of community that we're even experiencing right now in our church and around us. Then we'll kind of do some other things as we kind of finish out the series. But I'd love for you to be back here online or in person next week. Let's pray together. Father, I thank you so much. I thank you so much that you have invited us into your community. I thank you that you have ushered us in and actually included us in your mission of bringing the kingdom of heaven to earth. And while we're not much to look at, there's not much going on with us. We're not that great. We're not that prestigious, that powerful. And we might not even be a group of people who are a whole lot like us. I thank you for the diversity within this community. I thank you for the shared vision and the shared mission that we all carry. I thank you that we are a group that is for something, not just against things, but for something. And I thank you for us being a place that wants to bring the kingdom of heaven to earth right here in Trinity. May it be in Trinity as it is in heaven. I pray that wherever we're at today, whether it's here in the room, whether it's online, whether we're out for a drive, a walk, whatever, I pray that you would be with us and present with us, and that you would be encouraging us to seek out people around us who we would commit ourselves to being in a community. We love you and we thank you for this opportunity and this privilege, just as Jesus showed to his disciples that we get to be a part of that today. We love you so much. We thank you for your love for us, your care for us, your provision for us. We pray that we would be your hands and your feet as we go out into this world around us that needs a light in the darkness, that needs hope in despair, and that needs community around it. Praise things in your name. Amen. Amen. Well, have a great week. Again, if you'd love to get connected right now, talk with me or Janessa, and we'd love to get you connected. Otherwise, we will see you back here next Sunday in person or online, or Tuesday at the worship night outside. Have a great week.